It's a high-powered coffee. It's very high energy, high velocity coffee. So if you love, instead of having to drink 5 cups of coffee, having 1 cup of coffee a day, definitely check it out. It's called Vertical Momentum, and all proceeds go to help veterans that are struggling with mental health and homelessness. I don't make any money on it whatsoever. So if you want to have a cup of coffee, but also help change a life, definitely check out the coffee. It will be available, and I'll leave it in the liner notes. And my book just dropped today. I re-released it, and now we have some bonus features. So I'm also going to drop that link in there. So now we're going to get talking to my brother Ernie. What's up, brother? How are you?
How you doing? How you doing, Richard? Thanks for having me, man.
Good. What's going on? How are you?
Good, good. Busy, which is good. Hanging in there. Taking advantage of the time we have with all this COVID stuff to get some things done. Don't want to waste the time. I'm dealing with the things that are important to me.
Now, where are you located?
I'm in Hockessin, Delaware. It's just south of the Pennsylvania border.
Okay, I love it. So where, with a name like that, where did you grow up? Because I'm sure it's not a nice Jewish name. So where did you grow up as a little boy, and what kind of family did you have?
Well, I'm one of the few. I'm the exception. I actually was born and raised in Delaware. I was raised in Newark, Delaware. I have 2 older brothers. My father was a lifelong Chrysler man. He worked at Chrysler, and so we lived in a working class neighborhood, and had a great childhood. We were very close and continue to cope. Both my parents are gone, but my brothers and I were very close, and our wives, and it's good. I learned the morals of caring for others, having empathy for others, and knowing that if you want something in life, you got to work for it. But remember those who may not have the bootstraps that people talk about, and just try to balance that whole life.
So growing up in Delaware, who were some of your sports teams? Because there were so many different teams around that area. So who did you pull for?
Oh, I was what they call a 4-for-4 guy. I was all Philadelphia sports teams. I all 4 to this day. Baseball was part of. It really was what I was weaned on. And my dad was a huge Phillies fan, and my mom too. And I remember being 3 years old and going to old Connie Mack Stadium and watching the Phillies play. And once I got through those turnstiles, it was like magic. I was just, and I've been a goner ever since. I've been hooked. And I love other sports as well. I was hoping to play football. I played baseball growing up. I played in college and semi-pro. But I also wanted to play football, but I had a sledding accident when I was 8 years old that kind of derailed all those plans. And not going into too much detail, but I was in a hospital for 5 months and had a lot of surgeries. And at that point, the doctors told me I shouldn't play football. And my parents strictly adhered to that throughout my childhood, even though I tried to convince them that I could be a kicker, if nothing else, and they wouldn't go for it. I also wanted to be a boxer, and I've always had a love for boxing, but because of that restriction, I wasn't permitted to do that either. But I've always had a love for the sport. I grew up during the great golden years of the heavyweight division with Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, and even the second tier guys who were considered second tier, the Jimmy Youngs, the Ron Lyles, Ken Norton wouldn't be a second tier guy, but it was just a golden time. I don't know how old you are, but it was such a golden time for any fight fan.
Well, I remember I'm 53, and my uncles would all get together on Saturday nights and watch the Saturday night fights.
Oh yeah.
and I've seen some of the great ones.
Yeah.
And but now go back to baseball a little bit. I've had a
Sure.
couple baseball players on this year, and
Hmm.
they say that being in a locker room, it's kind of a lot like being in the military, where what goes on in the locker room, it's supposed to stay in the locker room.
Yes.
Not but obviously we know it doesn't. But
Right.
and and the relationships you build in that locker room become lifelong. Uh,
Hmm.
think lifelong. But now when you were coming up, and when I first was coming up, that's when it was mostly a white white people play the game. And then
Hmm.
then of course Mr. Aaron and all those people like that, and the younger people that were in the Negro leagues, you know
Hmm.
they after a while they kind of got forgotten.
Hmm.
you know and I think like something that you really love and touch on is you talk about how they need to be respected and brought back into the forefront, just like
Hmm.
eventually when we die and pass away and get old, people are gonna be like, who was Michael Jordan?
Hmm.
you know if because
Right.
eventually time goes by, everything gets forgotten.
Hmm. Hmm.
So talk about how
Right.
you what your thought process as you were coming up and learning, about the Negro Leagues, and then also watching everything happen unfold in MLB.
Right. I remember, if I could just when I was in second grade, it was the year Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I remember we were off for school that day of his funeral, and I asked my mother, I remember this distinctly. I asked why this man was killed, and she says, "Well, honey, some people don't like and hate other people because of the color of their skin." And in my childlike innocence, that made no sense to me. That made no sense to me because I just it just and that just stuck with me. And that really, I think, all through my youth, I always tried to reach out to my African American, in school. There weren't that many, but I would always try to reach out to them, and I would always try to uh, befriend them, and even at a young age after that experience. But of course, I was, as I got older, and you get affected by society and you get impacted, your views change. Not that it didn't change to the point where it wasn't like a situation where I became a racist. I didn't hate African Americans. I didn't, but you just become, you see what happens in society, and it impacts you in that it 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 makes you see things in a different light, and it's something that I contend with. I have contended with. It's not so much, and if you've read my pieces, it's not so much racism, but as a white person, I know I can only speak for myself, and but there was a time you're oblivious as a white person to some of the things, a lot of the things that black people had to endure, and I think it doesn't affect you directly, and it's not malicious. It's not something that you intentionally do. It's just something that's part of the human condition. That you're oblivious to a lot of those things. I think that's the thing that I came to realize, is that you didn't understand, and you could never understand that experience. And sometimes you can understand, well, why are they saying those things? I don't understand. These things don't happen, and yes, they do. And that's something that I've come to realize, and it's something that's driven me to do what I'm doing now. In that, it, and again, I think it's just the unawareness, that of what communities of color have endured, and I just try to, that's something that I try to keep mindful of, because it's something that I believe is undeniable. Um, so that's, but it started at a very young age, as far as just not make the whole idea of not liking someone because of the color of their skin. But then I think later you realize that the hatred there is deep rooted, for other reasons. None of them justifiable, obviously. It's not something that's correct, but you have to understand the history, see where the hatred came from. Never justified.
Now,
It never justified.
now
But it's
I'm a big history buff.
hmm
I'm the guy that if we're going to talk about something, I want to read everything I can about it. I want to be
hmm
up to date. A lot of people are just part of the Facebook generation. They don't
right,
want to. You know, a lot of people will complain about the Quran, but never read it. A
right,
lot of people, will talk about the Nation of Islam, but they'll never read books about it or actually, read books like the autobiography of Malcolm X.
right.
So people, they just see what they see. But for me, I seen it from a different point of view because in 1980 or 1990, I was homeless and I was taken in by a colored family for 2.5 years. And they taught me, what it was like. And they taught me, um, you know, about how the matriarchs and the patriarchs of the family and what they went through. But then, the gentleman that helped, I consider him a stepfather. His name was Ray. He always taught me that, um, you know, that people of color need to stop making excuses also. That, like I talked to him recently and he said, once a person of color becomes the president of the United States and holds the highest office in the world, your excuses are no longer viable. So I think that we as people, I mean, not any color, it doesn't matter what you are, because my father came over from the boat on Italy, and he became the man that he is. But as we get into this new age of having these things called cell phones and smartphones, there's no reason, no matter what color you are, not to become successful.
Well, I know what the one thing that that whole experience with President Obama. I think the counter to that is the fact that I think it brought a lot of it brought to light the fact that racism is alive and well in this country because there was a lot of pushback, um, and there was a lot of hostile. Not he won the elections, and that to me that was fantastic. I think it was a great stride forward, but it also I think highlighted the fact that there are a lot of very racist elements in our society that viewed his presidency for whatever reason as the downfall of our society, which I will never be able to fathom. But
Me,
uh,
me either.
I don't understand how that could happen.
Now
And
I voted for Mr. Obama,
so
but
did I.
before I voted for him, I made sure I read all his books. I wanted to know what he was about,
Hmm
because that's the kind of guy that I want to be. I want to be that informed guy,
hmm
not just the person that like, oh well, this person, my grandmother is voting for this person. That's why I'm voting for this person. You know what I
hmm
mean? And there's
hmm
some people out there. You'll ask them, why are you a Democrat or a Republican? And they'll be like, I don't know, because my
hmm
grandfather. Yeah,
right, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I'm not a member of either party. In fact, I've come to believe as other um, people have believed as I mean, founding fathers that system would be full, and because what instead of dealing with what's right and what's wrong, we're dealing with what's good for our party and how will we win, putting the party before country. And
like
that's that's
you
the
know,
recipe for disaster.
for me, I believe, and this is really weird, but I believe it that if we say if a Republican wins the presidency, we should have a Democrat as the vice president, or vice versa, because this way we
We
know
know,
we're
Yeah,
They're all
my understanding is that at some point, at one point in our history, that the candidate who lost the election became the vice president.
yeah.
At some point early in our history, I think that was the way it worked. I say I think because I don't know for sure. But I believe at one point that was the way, forcing people to work together.
Yeah.
The vice presidency, though, is a different kind of. In terms of the Constitution, it basically states that you need to have a pulse. You need to preside over the Senate, break a 50-50 tie, and you need to be able to take over as president if at some point the president becomes incapacitated.
Yeah.
And that's basically the role of the vice president. But I think symbolically, at least, what you're saying, that you've got to somehow get away from this whole idea. We're all tribal now. We all have our own little, own little echo chambers that we escape to, and it's unfortunate that we've got so many. We may not know. Oh, he's a liberal, oh, he's a fascist, he's, that kind of thing. We've got to get away from it somehow. I don't have the answer to that, but all I can do is what I can do. And hopefully other people will, take the same path.
And one of the saddest days, but I think one of the greatest days this country ever had was September 12th of 2001. There was no African American, there was no Italian American. We were all Americans. We were all USA, USA. They sold out of flags, I think, in like 24 hours. Everybody was all about our country again. And I know it was a hard day, but it put us together again. And it seemed like eventually we kind of forgot that we're supposed to be the United States of America, not the divided States of America.
Right, and I agree. And there was no Republican, no Democrat, and George W. Bush. I did not vote for him, but you know what? That was irrelevant. I mean, at some point, the country has to come first. There are times when we're 50 states, and there are times when we're one country with national needs, and that will, September 12th was one of those times. And I'm not sure exactly where it began. I honestly think, ironically, that President Obama's one of the points where one of the triggers for a lot of the division. Not his fault, because I think he was I personally think he was a great president who tried to reach out and tried to be nonpartisan as much as he could, and for some reason it became a divided nation, and now we're at where we are now, and I just I don't know what the answer is to get back to that. I'm worried. I really am. I don't know where we're going to go with this.
Well, I think just things like this, just two people sitting down, being able to talk over a cup of coffee and talk things over, because sometimes you might say something and I'll be like, oh yeah, I get it. And I think sometimes I think the whole problem with the police department, and if a police officer would just sometimes sit down with the public, and like in my town we have a couple with the cops, and sit down and talk to the cops, and and get both sides, because there's always three sides of the story, your side, my side, and the truth. So if some people would just be able to sit down and talk and converse like we used to do, and break bread instead of doing this all the time.
Right.
Maybe
Right. We have ADD as a society. We're so distracted all the time. And I agree. You're sitting down and talking. And that's all we can do is what we can do. Can't I try to stay away from what I can't control, which is a lot, and it's difficult to do in this society we have of immediate and constant so-called news. It's really it's gone. It's something that we just have to. I've said many times in this interview. We're gonna have to find some way to get over this. And I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think you're right. I think hopefully the conversations and people will follow your lead and do these things and just sit down and talk honestly about situations. Yeah, that's I agree.
But now,
It's
a
gotten.
lot of, when people talk about racism, most of the times they're always thinking about, white people hating on black people or Spanish people.
Hmm.
But I mean, now you got to be honest, and we're gonna like I said
Hmm.
before, I'm gonna be the devil's advocate, because if I
That's
don't,
fine.
you know,
Yeah. Hmm.
there's a lot of cancel culture going on, but not on the black side. Like if we came out today with a white entertainment TV or a
Hmm.
show called Whitish,
Hmm.
uh, or there, or like the football has the historically black colleges. If they
Hmm.
did the same historically white colleges, people would lose their mind and start calling about cancel culture. So
Hmm.
don't you think that it's kind of going a little bit too far the other way now?
I think there was a time when I did think that. There was a time, but I don't. I think when you consider the history of, when you talk about a predominantly white colleges, well, I think our history shows that we generally did have predominantly white colleges.
But now,
I
but
think.
we're not promoting that in that way.
I'm sorry, I didn't
You
hear that. I didn't hear you.
We're not promoting it, those colleges right now, as, oh, come on to a historically white college.
Right, right, and we shouldn't. I hear what you're saying, but I think for me, the history of the experiences of African Americans in this country is so much different than we as white people. We've always been the dominant culture, so we've always made the rules. And I think, when you consider that history, again, speaking personally, and let me just say that no racism is correct. Racism is wrong. I don't care who's
Amen.
practicing it. Muhammad
Amen.
Ali even said, he goes, I'm probably paraphrasing it, but he said it many times, that he goes, hating someone because of the color of the skin is wrong, regardless of the color of the skin of the people who's doing the hating. And that's undeniable. It's wrong for that reason. And at the same time, acknowledging uh, why someone might feel that way, not condoning it, but just understanding it, but never condoning it. You can never, that you're absolutely right. Racism is racism.
Right.
And
Okay. Question.
I mean, I
I
don't
have.
think anyone is entitled to be a racist. Let me just put it that way. No
All
one's
right. So
entitled to be
I
a
have a question, because you brought up Muhammad Ali.
racist.
Now everybody, I love Muhammad. I think he's probably the greatest fighter of all time.
Hmm.
But now, how can a person not say he was racist if he was under the teachings of Louis Farrakhan
Hmm.
and all he does is spew hate? So can you go?
Hmm.
Can it go
Hmm.
both ways?
What you mean, racism?
Yeah.
You mean, yeah, sure. I mean, absolutely. I mean, yeah, anybody can be racist. And it's what I focus on, and what I'm trying to focus on with my work is, I'm concerned with what works, and racism doesn't work.
Not at
It's
all.
self-destructive. It's unproductive.
Yeah.
It's not going to achieve anything. And what it's going to do is going to shut down the kind of conversations that we're having right now.
Yeah.
the cancel culture. It shuts down it shuts down the conversations that we have. And if I'm not mistaken, I think at some point Muhammad Ali did change his thinking on that. I believe that at some point he broke away from not the Muslim
Islam.
religion,
Yeah.
but from that particular sector of the religion. And I
Yeah.
think I mean, if you look at his funeral service, he had
Mhm.
absolutely every religion represented
Yeah.
in his service. And I think that showed, and and I think he evolved like we all do. He had one of my favorite quotes from him and from anyone is when he said, "A man who's the same at age 50 as he was at age 20 wasted 30 years."
And
And I mean, I think that says it all right there. I think he was talking about himself.
for me, one of my favorite books and movies of all time is Malcolm X, and how
Mm,
eventually he changed his mindset to realize we're just all people, no matter what
hmm.
color.
Right,
We're all people. And I think if
right,
we could
right.
get that into our mindset that we're just people, that's
Hmm,
all we are.
hmm,
And if we could just open our eyes to realize that we're people,
hmm,
now we'll talk about boxing a little bit and combat
hmm.
sports. you
Right.
know when Mike Tyson first came out, he was a badass, but
Hmm,
until Customato actually showed him some love, and he was an old white guy, but he
hmm.
showed him and
Oh
put
yeah.
his arm around Mike
Right.
and showed him some love. I think that's
Hmm.
when Mike Tyson became Mike Tyson. So talk
Right.
about what you're doing with combat sports, and what your passion is.
Well, I'll tell you the point. What you were talking about, as far as an old white guy taking in Mike Tyson, really, and he adopted. My understanding is that he actually officially legally adopted him.
Yeah.
And with my organization back in 2015, just give you a brief history of how I got there. In 2018, I retired after a 32 plus year career in the criminal justice system for the state of Delaware. The first 10 plus years, I was an arbitrator in the family court system in Delaware, and during which I presided over first time offender misdemeanor criminal cases. From there, I went to the Office of the Public Defender for the state of Delaware, and for 22 years, during which I did psychoforensic work. And for 20 years, 20 of those years, I actually worked in a prison here in Wilmington, Delaware. And that experience showed me that the potential that was wasted, through choices that were made for various reasons, predominantly by people of color. I mean, what I saw is what I saw and what I experienced. You can't deny that. And I decided that I wanted to start using the acumen that I developed and obtained not only in my criminal justice career, but I also had simultaneous sports careers. I was a coach, baseball coach. Then I was a scout, an associate scout, what they call a bird dog, for the Kansas City Royals and the Philadelphia Phillies for about 3 years. Then I became an agent for a few years. And then after that, that's when I got into the boxing realm. And I've always loved. That was the first personal experience I had working with fighters, and so all these experiences, I wanted to use the experiences and the skills that I developed to basically help the greater good. Don't want to sound too altruistic, but I wanted to do things that were. I always thought sports was a very, very powerful entity in our society, and if used for good, it can really be an effective social tool for healing. I mean, look at you had mentioned 9/11 or September 12th.
Yeah.
Sports were used as an incredible means of getting through that time for people. It created an escape, and it created a sense of unity. And I also believe, especially in the combat sports, and because obviously, as you know, the combat sports are international, and most of the individuals that are involved in those sports are people who come from uh, backgrounds of poverty, a little means, which makes them so hungry. And at the same time, that hunger and desire can also make them vulnerable
Okay.
to some of the negative elements.
Now I have a question to ask because, like I said, I worked with Lennox
Hmm.
for a couple years,
Right.
and now I'm going to ask you: is it a question of nature or nurture, where you never heard anything outside of the boxing ring, never got in trouble, always respectful, is known as an ambassador? Ambassador,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know.
Are you
But I
talking
think,
about Lennox?
yep,
You're talking about
Lennox.
Lennox? Yeah, and there are exceptions. Absolutely. I'm not saying everyone who fights. Some of my best friends and some of the nicest and best people I've ever met were fighters.
I mean,
I'm not saying that,
you look
but
at, Sugar Ray
hmm.
never had anything really happen outside of the ring. They kept it
Hmm.
all inside the ring.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
is it nature or is it nurture that the way these people, not people, I mean, because I know a lot of white kids, including me, that fought. Um,
Sure, sure.
we grow up angry.
Right.
So of course, the first thing you want to hit something.
Hmm.
So the
Right.
first thing you see, either boxing or wrestling, or so does it start from the beginning up from childhood? Is that what you're seeing? A lot of people that are angry, then maybe get involved with the PAL or something like that. That's how they get
Hmm.
involved in combat sports.
Right. Yeah. It's yeah. That's been my experience. And as far as nature versus nurture, I mean, we all have a genetic personality that we're born with. But my personal experience, again, because of my professional experience, I think for the most part, again, I always have to qualify with there are exceptions to every kind of rule.
Yeah.
But I believe that someone's experience, we're all product of our experiences. And I also believe that at some point we have to take responsibility for our own lives, regardless of our experiences. We still have to take responsibility and try to overcome the deficits that we had to endure, regardless of whether we're responsible or not. But we, at some point, we have to take responsibility and change our lives for ourselves. And that's what our organization is about: is giving individuals the opportunity to do that. We don't do it for them; we provide them with the opportunity. And the one thing in my 32 plus years in criminal justice is actually, that actually it's 35. I was at Glen Middle Schools for 2.5 years out of college. Is that the one thing that you realize is, that I, at some point, um, you you have to accept the fact that you can create change, and that's something that it sounds harsh, and I learned that in criminal justice, only you can make change. And I don't live under any delusions because of that experience that I'm going to be able to help and everyone is going to take advantages of the services we offer. You either make a choice to take advantage or you don't. And and that's it. And I don't live under any illusions about, what how successful we may or may not be. How successful we are is based on the people that we're trying to serve, and it's really their success. It's and we just provide the opportunity. That's what I define as our success, is that we provide them with the opportunity. What they do with it defines their success.
Yep. And like for me, I'm known as the guy that talks about that the three most important words in the English language are today, I decide.
Right.
We are our decisions. You
Hmm.
know, you want to find out where we're going to be in 5 years, look at decisions we're going to make today and this afternoon.
Hmm.
But
Right.
now
Right.
also, I'm in New Jersey, and they're legalizing marijuana, and
Hmm.
now they're making getting people that were locked up for it. Now they're getting released. So if they made those conscious decisions back then and they knew it was illegal, why should they get off today just because they changed the laws now? Like if I
What?
walk into a house or in the 1940s because of prohibition, and I went to jail.
Hmm.
They're not going to let me out just because, oh, we changed the law on it. You still got to do the time, right?
I personally believe, yeah. I mean, the absolutely, yeah. I mean, you have to understand the risks. Whether or not you think marijuana is harmful or harmless, that's not the issue. I'm not going to go there. That's not the point. But if you understand that it's against the law, you understand the risk you're taking. You know, I mean, yeah, I feel that way about someone who drinks underage and gets caught.
Yeah.
You know, okay, yeah, it's an unfair law, but it's still a law, and
Yeah.
you know it's a law. So you take that risk. So I no, and as I was getting ready to say, the three different keys to what we're trying to do in crime prevention are fair and equitable law enforcement, fair and equitable accountability, and the third one is what we try to do is the rehabilitation and providing an opportunity. So yeah, I believe that there has to be law enforcement, effective, and again, fair law enforcement, fair and effective accountability, and fair and effect, and rehabilitation. Those
Now,
three things.
I worked in the prison system for a little while,
Hmm.
and I've spoken at plenty of jails, rehabs, and if a
Hmm.
person is not willing to get help,
Hmm.
you're wasting your breath. There is no
Absolutely.
patient, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, and you have to provide, you can't, if all you can do is provide people with the opportunity. You know, if you're trying, if anything beyond that, anything beyond you basically just providing the opportunity and it becomes enabling. All you do is accountability is so key in every aspect of life. Uh, You, if you're not accountable and you're not feeling that you need to change your behavior, nothing's going to change regardless of how someone wants to help you. And after a while, it gets to be an enabling process. And it gets to be about, I mean, I work with individuals who had that approach that basically got to be about them being needed. It got to be more about the person providing the service than the person who's receiving the service. And it doesn't work that way. It's not going to work that way. Um, you got, there was a saying that we had in the prison I worked with, Richard, that was very effective, and it's so true. And to this day, it's something that, and it's for all of us, not just people in prison, not just the people who've committed crimes. It's life is 99 is 90%, 10% what happens to us, and 90% how we deal with it. And that
Yeah.
is so true. Absolutely. I mean, that's true for any of us. What are you going to do about it? Is basically what are you going to do about it?
Now, for me, we'll talk about sports a little bit more, and then we're going to head off. I believe
Mhm,
every child should be involved in some kind of, whether it's martial arts, whether it's boxing, MMA, because I believe the self discipline that you learn. And
mhm,
for me,
mhm,
I talk to Navy SEALs, I've talked to Rangers, and some of the most intense people I've ever met. They had a background in either wrestling or boxing
mhm,
because they know the dedication, the discipline, the road work. For wrestling, sometimes you got to cut weight, and
mhm,
it's normally right before the holidays. So they know
mhm,
the discipline that it takes to be in combat sports. So, what are your thoughts
mhm.
on young people coming up and and getting taught combat sports?
Well, I think I believe that when done properly, I think it can be in a very effective life tool. It can be very it can be a very positive experience. I think a lot of people who don't have any experience in those sports seem to think it is just a brutal kind of barbaric activity in which you have no respect for your opponents, or you have no respect for anyone that you're competing against, which couldn't be farther from the truth. Um, it's an appreciation and respect for your opponent. I mean, they see a lot of the trash talk in the trash talk in all sports, and they see all that. And but the thing is, that's all really just a promotion. We
Yeah.
both know that's you're trying to promote the event. I mean, Ali started that,
Yeah.
and even his opponents weren't upset because they understood what his motives were. By doing that, he was probably making the whole event more profitable for them. But then
Sell tickets.
once the bell rings, yeah, once the bell rings, the essence, and that's what you see after the fight. They have each other. They have an appreciation and respect, just like football games. Any other sport. And so yeah, I think it teaches it had a lot of life lessons that when you knock down, get up. A lot of metaphor with those sports, but it's so true. And yeah, it's something that that can be very positive for young people if they're with the right. They have to get the right instruction, and they have to have positive people in their lives doing it. Who aren't there to manipulate or take advantage of these young people.
And for me, I think that it gives you, when you've practiced it a while or you've been in it a while, it gives you some quiet self-confidence to where or I know that if I get in a fight, I'm going to kill somebody. I'm not going to play around, slap box. So I don't want to get involved in any of that stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. The intent is not to kill someone. The intent is to win, whatever, just like any other sport. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And you my pieces, the injuries are a concern. But it's a concern that needs to address, and I think it's addressed through. I think the way we're doing is addressing the issue of giving them options so that they don't have to. They make a decision that is the best decision for themselves, their families, their own well-being, and if they're taking a fight. For a good example is I had one of the fighters I co-managed. I was able to get him into a job training program here in Delaware for culinary arts. He finished it, got a job as a chef locally. So he worked that job while fighting. He was with a promoter in Philadelphia. He had just had a knockout win, and the promoters wanted him to fight 2 months later. And he made the decision, no, that's too soon. That's too soon. I'm concerned about what that might do for me physically. But had he not had that other revenue stream, he could have been more likely to take that fight, even though it wasn't in his best interest to do so. That encapsulates what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide them with some leverage in their own careers by creating other revenue streams for them. And then what they decide to do with it is up to them. The last thing I want to do is deter people if they want to have a fight career. But if you do it the right way, and you put yourself in a situation where you can make a choice, a sound choice, then that's what we're hoping to achieve.
So then how do we find you? How do we get in touch with you? And by the way, I love all your readings that you sent me. So how do we find those, and how can we support your mission?
Okay, well, you can support the mission by if anyone wants to make a donation, we have a PayPal page on our website, which is www.caangroup.org. If you have any fighters out there who are starting their career, and they want to pursue a membership in our organization, by the way, the services we provide currently is we provide access to credit union accounts, financial accounts, so they provide financial assistance, and good RX memberships. And we also provide, we don't provide personally, but we provide referrals for independent legal contract review and consultation. And those things, if anyone wants to become a member, and we're hoping to expand those services too. But we need money for that. So they can email at happy athlete, one word, 2424 at gmail.com. And I will send them an application for membership. And if there's anyone out there who just believes in what we're trying to do, if you want to read my pieces, by the way, you can go on the stansburyforum.com, stansburyforum.com, and you can search me, Ernie Distefano. Ernest Distefano is how I'm referred to in my pieces and my columns, and get an idea of my position and what we're doing with the organization and for Negro League player reparation. You can get an idea of those. Coming out with another essay soon that gives everyone an update on our reparation efforts for Negro League players and their families. And I'm working on that now. So that'll be out soon. Rich, I can let you know when that drops.
And I'll share that out. I got no problem with that. But guys,
I appreciate that.
I want to make sure that you guys check out everything that Ernie's doing. He's changing the game. He's doing it from his heart. He's not making money off of it. It's all heart-centered. So I just want to say thank you, Ernie. I want to thank our sponsors, Vertical Momentum Coffee. If you guys love coffee, if you like kick-ass coffee, if like today's Monday, if you feel like you've had your ass kicked, how about you start kicking Monday's ass by getting some Vertical Momentum Coffee? And I just want to say, Ernie, thank you so much. Guys, definitely get involved, because if we can help get some people off the street and get them into better mental health space by combat sports, I'm all for it.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate the opportunity. If I could just give him the contact information one more time, I'd appreciate it. Yep. Again, the website is www.cangroup.org. Email address is happyathlete4@gmail.com. And bringing me on, it was a great conversation. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
All right, brother. Well, have an amazing week. And guys, remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is but up.